So in the last video I posted, I was talking about the different trends that we see that are transforming the Protestant churches and bringing them back in step with Rome. And they seem to be different divergent movements, but they, at the core, have this inner circle of network called leadership network, I think. And basically, they are all reading the same books and listening to the same people and going to the same conferences. So even though they appear outwardly to be completely divergent, like you wouldn't see a Reformed church, for example, uh, going and listening to uh, charismatic preachers, right? Um, or for that matter, a Reformed church going and sitting in a emergent, often like a wildly emergent, because they're very literal in the way they say they approach the Bible, even though they allegorize everything in the Reform movement. But so, in other words, they seem to be diametrically opposed outwardly, but inwardly, there's this leadership and a network. And if you start putting the pieces together and dig into it, look up names like Peter Drucker, for example. He was he's the guy, he's in the corporate world. He developed something called total quality management, and it was a way to implement and manage and monitor change in organizational structures. And he became a mentor to Robert Schuller and Bill Hybels and Rick Warren. And Rick Warren, especially, took off with some of his principles in the organization of Saddleback Church, which then became a model for the seeker sensitive, purpose driven church growth movement, um, where instead of just preaching the gospel, they reverted to marketing techniques and figured out what the people around them would want to see in a church and made the church comfortable for them, even though they're unbelievers. You see the coffee house emerges and the music change, and even though Rick Warren vocally was Orthodox, he um, suppressed truth to take out anything offensive. So this is the purpose-driven, seeker-friendly movement, and what you see through this is the doors are wide open for tares and unbelievers to come in and mix themselves with the wheat and the sheep. And the favor is given to the influx of unbelievers over the needs of the sheep. And the sermons become more and more entertainment for the goats, like Spurgeon said, rather than food for the sheep. And that changed everything. And the charismatic churches were affected by it. Everybody was affected by that. The emergent church, they're trying to meet the need of the postmodern generation. So the purpose-driven church met the needs of consumers, but the emergent church just takes it to the next step to meet the next generation, which is postmodern. Truth doesn't exist. Truth is based in your feelings. If we're prideful, if we absolutely say we know the truth, you can't be dogmatic about anything. So let's focus on social justice and where they have things in common with the Reformed lordship guys is that they are young people that don't have the same financial outlook that their parents did. They're not living in the land of prosperity the way their parents were, where it was infinite growth. They see that their opportunities are more limited, and they look at it as their parents' fault. Now, the Lordshippers say it's because their parents didn't walk the way of Jesus and live the kingdom the way Jesus said. They look at that whole generation of consumers as false believers. Well, the emergent ones don't even care whether you're a false believer or a true believer, because who can say that that's even relevant? they just have a socialist outlook on life and on how society should be run. And anyway, see, there's a trend there though where that aligns those two groups, where the Calvinists are very strict about their doctrinal views, but socially they're going in the same direction as the Emergents, and the Emergents don't care about the doctrinal views. So they'll just be nice to the Calvinists and they can get along. That's an oversimplification, but it's how it is. And the charismatics are still kind of out on the fringe a little bit. But Hillsong is sweeping all of these churches as another uniting factor. So on the inside, there was this core group of people that were kind of like, in a way, secretly have to do the digging to find out that they're all listening to each other, even though they're going in different directions. But the music, the worship music, is sort of like the siren call. And through that, you're able to get the young people from every one of these places. And now what you see is an open cross-pollenization where there's these gigantic unity conferences where all the young people go, and you can Google them, but hundreds of thousands of young people go to the Washington Mall and pray for unity and pray. And guess who's there? Representatives of the Catholic Church, and they've got messages from the Pope streaming, and they've got charismatic leaders like Lou Engle and NAR guys, and they've got Francis Chan up there from the Dominionist movement. And so you see this cross-pollination happening where, you say, why was there so much division in the church? The division does not come from the sheep. It comes from the speakers. And Paul makes that clear. He says, it's through smooth words and fair speeches that those who teach contrary to what the doctrine you've received, you got to mark them and turn away. It's not talking about sheep. It's talking about people with a bullhorn, the voice. It's the leaders. And Satan allowed these different schools of doctrine to come in and divide the church so that the sheep would get exhausted and go, well, I just don't even know, right? I mean, what's right? He says this, he says that, he says this, he says that. And then into that comes well-meaning people who say, you know what? Let's just walk in love and unity. And they resurrected Augustine's statement, in essentials, unity, in non-essentials, tolerance, and in all things, love. Sounds beautiful, but it's used as a suppressing technique to keep the sheep silent, to squelch the sheep so that they won't ask questions anymore, because now they're just being taught, you just need to keep the unity. That's what's really important. Think of what God could do if we were all just united and let our petty differences fall to the side and stop bickering about non-essentials. Well, now what's funny is the sheep are told not to bicker about non-essentials. And we say that there are some essentials that make us up as believers, and we say, well, it's, we all believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and that's the only essential we're allowed to unify on. And what's interesting is, the essentials of the faith, which are supposed to be the source of our unity, are never preached from the pulpit. The teachers deal almost entirely in non-essentials. Aberrant theology, they're free to say whatever they want to say, and you just have to be quiet and keep the unity and listen to all this divisive chatter coming from the pulpits. Well, now that they've got the sheep sufficiently confused and sufficiently silenced, now you'll start to see the open, like I said, cross-pollinization or reunification. And it won't be because they all necessarily agree doctrinally. They'll just set the doctrines aside altogether. And then, now that the sheep are not in the Word, or the people are not in the Word, I don't even know if they're sheep if they're still in these situations, being deceived. You might be in these situations and just weeping That's different than actually going along with it and rejoicing, right? Um, the Now that the sheep have been mollified, you'll start to see a unity, and there will be new doctrines coming out that will be spoken by very bold personalities that you will be absolutely intimidated to touch. Now, I believe those are coming out of the NAR, because the NAR, they know how to speak with a authority that'll just scare the bejesus out of you. And at this point, when society is like this, now we're just looking for the strong leaders. We don't know what we believe. But that doesn't mean that postmodernism is going to last. Postmodernism is a transitional stage to collapse everything that went before and leave us as a blank slate so that we'll embrace what's coming, which will be a totally occultic Luciferian doctrine spoken very boldly but wrapped in biblical language. And if you're not nuanced and if you're not a sheep, you're not going to know the difference. And it'll embrace everybody. So that's the cross-pollinization. I'm going to do another video about how this is actually practically worked out locally in your church. Why have these changes been so quickly in the last few years? You see these changes just absolutely accelerating, and how have they been able to ram that through to where now people are embracing this or tolerating it with very little resistance, and they've managed their church structure in a way to identify and stigmatize anyone who would oppose the agenda and silence everybody else. We'll get to that because this video is getting a little long.